Hello and welcome back to the 3 on NY3 podcast, focused exclusively on New York's new 3rd Congressional District and the race for Congress this year. My name is Andrew Whitman. Wanted to thank you so much for listening or watching as this experiment into local political coverage continues. As you may recall, I am currently not working as a political professional. Hopefully that does not last too much longer. I took this on as a hobby, having no idea at the time that my hobby would face court-imposed mission creep, but that's exactly where we are. We're going to get to our candidate content for this episode. That's more from our 3-on-3 candidate questionnaire in just a few minutes, but wanted to start this episode with an update on the court-imposed redistricting process. The preliminary map from the special master appointed by the court is out. It came out today, Monday, May 16th is when we're recording this. Should be finalized by the end of the week. The court has to sign off on it. Statewide, the impression is the sense that the map is bad for Democrats, much worse than the previous map had been. And the sense about New York's 3rd district is that it makes the district much more competitive for a possible Republican win, might even make the race a toss-up. If adopted, the new 3rd would remain predominantly in northern Nassau. Now, it would only be in northern Nassau instead of, as we thought when the now antiquated map was adopted in February of 2022, the district at that point extended along the North Shore east into Suffolk County and then west through Queens, the Bronx, and into Westchester. This new proposed map, if approved, would eliminate the Westchester, the Bronx, and Suffolk portions of the 3rd and would replace it with a slightly larger slice of Queens and a new strip of the 3rd district that runs north-south along the Nassau border with Suffolk County, running straight down to the South Shore, down to Massapequa at its southern terminus. The net result, if that map is adopted, would make it a much more balanced district, where we thought the district was going to have a 10-point Democratic lean. That now gets reduced to 5 or 6 at the most. And while that's a Democratic advantage, those points are probably going to matter in this general election, which is thought to be better for Republicans than for Democrats. Let's say Republicans run 5 points better than anticipated across the country. That makes this district very much a toss-up. And as you look at things like the generic congressional ballot and other polling, as well as polling about President Biden, that seems like a very distinct possibility that the 3rd district, if approved under this new map, could become a real toss-up district. We've also heard from the court that the candidates now have to submit new signatures, so the petition process has to totally start over on the off chance that they wound up with signatures on their petitions that came from people who no longer live in the new 3rd district, if again the new map is, as expected, approved at the end of this week. There's also the question as to who the candidates will be, and as we tape this on Monday, May 16th, 4 of the 6 current candidates have announced their intentions to remain in the race. John Kamen, Melanie Dorigo, Josh Lafazin, and Robert Zimmerman. As of 8:30 p.m. Monday, we have yet to formally hear from either Rima Rasool or Alessandra Biaggi. Now, most eyes are going to be on Biaggi. She is the only candidate who does not live in Nassau and is now drawn out of the district if the special master's map is approved. In fact, her hometown of Pelham has been drawn into the new 16th district, which may well see 2 incumbent Democratic congressmen, Jamal Bowman and Mondaire Jones, forced to square off in a primary, making it that much less likely that Biaggi would then enter that race. So lots still to be settled. By the way, I have also been drawn out of the new map. My home in Portchester is also now in the new 16th district. The proposed map does not seem to obviously invite any new candidates to enter into the race. No one obviously who got drawn out of their old district that I know of were drawn into the proposed New York 3. So a couple of things to keep in mind as this week plays out. A candidate does not have to live in the district to be eligible to represent the district. Usually that makes it harder to win, but there's nothing technically stopping, let's say, State Senator Biaggi from continuing to run in the 3rd, assuming the new map is adopted by the judge. Any decision that she or anyone else makes to run or not run in the 3rd district would be a political decision, not a geographic one, though it's certainly easy to see and understand how not living in the district might impact the politics of somebody running in that district. We also have yet to make a decision about the fate and future of this podcast. We're going to wait and see how the dust settles. Once it does, we'll reach back out to the candidates, and depending on their reaction, we'll see what steps make the most sense for the podcast. But for now, the podcast remains, and we have more work to do. For the remainder of this episode, we're going to return to the 3 on NY3 candidate questionnaire. 13 different questions that I asked of all 6 candidates in this race. All have appeared during the candidates' interview episodes, and you can go back and listen to them if you like, but there's value in contrasting and comparing their answers all at the same time, so that's what we're going to do right now. And it's an interesting set of questions that we'll include in this episode. The first being, what steps will you take, perhaps above and beyond what the law and ethics rules require, to ensure to voters that you are not profiting from your position if elected? Followed up with, name a position you hold that you think might be out of step with the bulk of your party. What's the best Republican idea you've heard lately? Name your favorite sports teams, your favorite political movie or TV show and why, and a question about political courage that we'll get into in greater detail later on in the episode. But we're going to begin with the first question that I asked of each candidate, the steps they'll take to assure voters that they're not profiting from their election to Congress. This question was born from 2 places. One, always something that I hear from voters is an assumption that just about every member of Congress is profiting from their position, which may explain why members seem so determined to hold on to their seats at almost all costs. So I wanted to address that concern from voters. Also, there's been a recent push to ban members of Congress from buying and selling stocks while in office. I wanted to see how many candidates would pledge not to trade stocks without being asked directly about that. And then some of I did ask directly, and just how far they would go with concrete plans to publicly disclose their financial information to the public. So a variety of answers. First up to answer that question about steps they'll take to ensure voters that they're not profiting from their position if elected, Melanie DiRigo.
Yeah, I absolutely refuse corporate money, as I mentioned earlier, and I hope to set the standard, and I hope to mentor other candidates as well to do the same. I'll continue to bring education around it. I will be involved in every community, which, as we have this many beautiful communities that are now part of the 3rd district, and continue to legislate policy that is people-centered and district-centered.
Lots of disclosures. You'll keep constituents updated on,
Yeah, I'm certainly an open book. We're funded by people, primarily. So no corporate money here, and that will never change.
Next up on the steps they'll take to ensure to the public that they're not profiting from their position in Congress if elected, Rima Rasool and John Kamen.
The fact that we have, electeds who think that it's okay for them to trade stock is so crazy to me. The fact that this is a discussion is so crazy to me. Number one, I would first of all, I don't trade stock anyway. So it's not like I'd be changing my lifestyle. I would stick to not trading, not being in the stock market. I would stick to that position as I do now.
That should make it easier.
That would make it easier. My company that I own, I would absolutely detach myself. I mean, for me, it's not like I'm very entangled financially. It wouldn't be a very difficult thing.
And you'd be willing to make all of that public, or at least disclose it so that people know that you're not?
100% disclosure. I mean, the fact that we have to beg right now, I was watching this morning the news, and the mayor is thinking about disclosing his taxes. That's crazy to me. You're the mayor. Of course you have to disclose. And of course, any elected official should have to disclose absolutely, and not be able to make any profit on decisions that they're making and power that they hold.
So, the key element to accountability for any elected official is disclosure. Making sure that, as I've said before, the common theme is parameters, transparency, accountability. And a lot of the times we have the rules in place. It's a question of enforcing them. It's a question of understanding them. I've seen people in government do horrible things or make mistakes and end up losing their way. Sometimes it's because I don't think people wake up in the morning and say I'm going to do horrible, terrible things to people. I think it's this incremental thing where somehow I do something and no one seems to see or care, and it just becomes the culture, and it becomes like accepted behavior, and then all of a sudden someone shines a light on it and we're like, oh wow, this is really bad. And so the way to address that is to make sure that we have a constant understanding of what the rules are, what the parameters are, how should we be conducting ourselves? How do we make sure that we are transparent so that the light of day shines on our everyday activities, what we invest in, what kind of, how we treat each other and the things that we do. And then to know how accountability works, what can happen. And so to me, that's how it works locally, and it works because we find people that do bad things and they're held accountable, and people then say, oh, well, government's not working. Well, maybe government is working when we find people doing that. But I think that would be the same at the national level.
On this line, should Congress people not be allowed to trade stocks while they're in office? Will you not trade stocks while in office?
I think I have 2 stocks. And I'm more than happy not to have those 2 stocks. I think that there's, I know there's also really extreme restrictions on a congressman's ability to make money. You can't make anything more than X dollars over your salary. And so I think those are good rules. I think that we need to hold people to them. If there's right now they're allowed to trade stocks. The problem is, are there insider information that they're getting, and is there any level of accountability? If there's a way to do that, that's fair, then we should do it. If there's ways that not, then we should end the practice. And I don't know the answer, but I know how it should end. It should end on what can work, and how can we make sure that everyone's being treated the same and being held accountable.
Again, that was John Kamen. The question is, what steps will you take to ensure to voters you're not profiting from your position in Congress if elected? Next up to answer, Alessandra Biaggi and Robert Zimmerman.
Well, first of all, I believe in banning elected officials, especially members of Congress, from insider trading and from trading stocks while they're holding office. So that is something I support, including, by the way, the extension to spouses, because it's really important that a family does not actually benefit off the backs of any kind of information that a majority of Americans would not actually support. So I would say that's the most important thing that I would support and make sure that doesn't exist. But in addition to that, being transparent about, the kinds of donors that I have, right? I don't take any corporate money or corporate PAC money. I don't take money from fossil fuel industries or from the pharmaceutical industries. Why? Because I actually want to make sure that the people in New York 3 and in this country have access to cheaper medicine, because it's too expensive for people to be able to live. I have this personal experience. My dad has Parkinson's. He takes many different drugs. One of them costs, one pill each month costs $1,100. One prescription. That's crazy. What person can actually afford that when it's life-saving medicine? So I don't want to ever take $1 from an industry that doesn't give a damn about the people that they're actually trying to, or at least pretend to want to protect. And the same thing for fossil fuels.
So we could expect a lot of disclosures from you, even above and beyond the requirements or
Yes.
whatever the ethics rules
Yes.
are?
And
Okay.
commitments, public commitments to not taking certain money and the follow through of that as well.
If elected, what steps will you take, perhaps above and beyond what the law and ethics rules require, to ensure to voters that you are not profiting from your position if elected?
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to sell my 50% of my firm. I've been a partner at ZE Creative Communications for 33 years. I will completely divest myself of any ownership of the company. Secondly, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to support the strictest legislation that's being produced. That it's I think very important to make sure that there's no insider trading. There are a number of very good bills put in place to avoid any issues of insider trading or even accidental knowledge. So my funds will be, I'm not sure what the proper legal word is, maybe it's called a blind trust, but it'll be something totally separate from my life. And my funds will not be in any way, whether it's in a blind trust or another format, will I have any role in the investment process of my investments.
So you'll hold off on trading individual stock if
I
elected?
don't do that anyway, quite frankly.
Okay.
My funds are with a bank, and they're managing it for me, so I don't engage in that practice.
We'll discuss that off camera about ways to increase those funds. I could use some advice.
It's a profoundly serious issue.
It is.
And it's one where, whether it's legally a blind trust or it's done legislatively, I am not at this stage of my life going to Congress to do anything but be in Congress.
And from Robert Zimmerman there, we move to our final response on financial disclosure, and that's from Josh Lafazin.
Case in point, I've served in government for 10 years, and I've never once had the audacity to even try, because government should be a full-time job in Washington, and a member of Congress should be there to serve the people with no other understanding that is their full-time job, that is their only job. And so that's the only job I'm going to have. It's the only job I want. And at the end of the day, my job of serving the people is going to be a full-time job enough. I spoke about this with my interns the other day. Serving in government is a privilege. It is not employment, right? We saw it under President Trump with the emoluments clause. Serving in government is not to enrich. That's how people wind up in jail. Serving in government is to serve others. And so the answer is, I've served in government for 10 years. I've served with integrity. I've served with dignity. And I believe I've served with grace, and I'll do the same in Washington.
Do you promise not to trade stock, even if that is not banned for sitting members of Congress?
Not only do I promise, I sold all my stock because I believe that members of Congress shouldn't be able to trade stock. I sold it all in anticipation of being able to serve in January. I'll co-sponsor that bill. It's outrageous that we're even having this debate.
You could have just given some of that stock to me. I would have taken it. The root of our next question comes from the primary process itself. Candidates typically try to out-party their opponents. Republicans try to show that they're more Republican than their challengers. So do Democrats. So I asked the candidates to name a position that you hold that you think might be out of step with the bulk of your party, really just to see what they would say and how far afield from the party orthodoxy they would be willing to go. Let's find out, first from Robert Zimmerman and then from Melanie DiRigo.
I guess there've been a lot of them over the years. I was advocating for LGBTQ plus rights when I felt too many leaders in my party were dragging their feet. I certainly have stood up for tax fairness. I've been certainly a strong advocate of restoring the state and local tax deduction, which Chuck Schumer's been a great leader on, but not enough Democrats have mobilized behind that issue, as far as I'm concerned, effectively enough. So I think there are examples such as that. I certainly those who advocate defunding the police, and we have that in this campaign as well. I think they are clearly out of step with the country and out of step with how to achieve real, thoughtful reforms that also support our police. We can do both.
Name a position that you hold that you think might be out of step with the bulk of the Democratic Party.
Getting corporate money out of politics.
That was Melanie DiRigo's response when asked to name a position that she thinks she has that is out of step with the rest of the Democratic Party. Next up, same question to Rima Rasool and Alessandra Biaggi.
Term limits. Term limits. I don't think that a lot of people believe in term limits. I will scream it from every rooftop. I've had so many amazing discussions with constituents about term limits where they're like, oh, well, that's just not the right thing. And I love those conversations because I learned so much. But absolutely term limits. I think that if our president can only be in for 2 terms, 8 years, I don't think and I believe this from top to bottom, even in town positions. We need term limits in this country.
Name a position that you hold that you think might be out of step with the majority of your party.
Not funny, actually. Term limits. I think it's out of step with a lot of parties.
You support term limits.
I support term limits, especially on an executive level. Like, I think that a governor should have term limits. I think that an attorney general should have term limits. I don't think that we want somebody being a governor for 16 years. And unfortunately, in New York, we were almost on that pathway. So yeah, at the executive level, I support term limits.
From Senator Biaggi, we continue with candidate positions that they believe are outside the mainstream of the Democratic Party. We'll finish off our answers to that question with Josh Lafazan, followed by John Kamen.
I am a Democrat who believes that defund the police is absolutely outrageous and who believes that law enforcement plays a role in our society that's important. We can talk about and we need reform in this country. And that is something that we're going to have to continue to talk about. Right. If you look at the first piece of reform when it came to policing on Long Island, it was my bill with legislator Bino looking at mental health response. But I'm a Democrat who says, looking right at you, Andrew, that law enforcement plays an important role in our society, that defund the police is outrageous, that bail reform is wrong. And I believe many in my party would disagree with me.
Name a position that you hold that you think might be out of step with the bulk of your party.
Well, I guess bail reform is probably a good place to start. I don't agree with Medicare for all. So, I believe in universal health care, and I don't think they're the same thing. I think in our country we have, I would not abolish the private healthcare system, and I think a lot of unions and organizations and people have, tens of millions of people have fought for private healthcare. I think the Affordable Care Act needs to be amended and repaired. It could be a public option. I know there's additional costs. But I see the tenor of the party going towards Medicare for all, and I wouldn't go in that direction.
Again, that was John Kamen when asked what positions he holds that he believes may be out of step with the bulk of the Democratic Party. There was a similar idea behind our next question. We wanted to see whose answers would stand out from the crowd when asked about the best Republican idea they've heard lately. Yes, the question provides a chance to dunk on the GOP and Republican positions if the candidates chose, or a chance to embrace a bipartisan idea. Was very interested to hear how the candidates would respond and how they did not respond. And let's begin with Alessandra Biaggi and Robert Zimmerman.
Best Republican idea I've heard lately. Okay, one thing that I think Republicans talk about that it's not a lately, even though they talk about it a lot, is that they seem to want to embrace the idea of like efficiency in government, and they're less about spending and having smaller government. One thing about that philosophy that I really do like is that we all should want efficiency in government spending, right? We should not want waste. I remember in 2019 when I did my first budget in Albany, and we went line by line by line by line, and I kept asking, well, why is this money going to this? And what is this going to? And like, what is this dollar? And how do we measure whether these programs have been successful? Do we have any metrics? And it was like a whole scattering of like, well, some things over here have worked. And like, that's complete. Like, if anybody's a taxpayer and you're listening to this, you should be like, what are you saying? Like, we need to have metrics for how our programs are successful. What are the promises on the front end, dollar to dollar? How are we actually using taxpayers' dollars efficiently? And what are we going to do to make sure that our government runs efficiently? Because guess what? Nobody wants to stand in line at the DMV for 3 hours waiting for a new license, just like nobody wants to have to wait for their new business to be incorporated for 7 months before they can get off the ground. So efficiency in government is something I really care a lot about, and I'm very much aligned on that with them, but the places we're aligned are pretty minimal, unfortunately.
What's the best Republican idea that you've heard lately?
I can't think of one lately that I've heard that I admire. I do respect Adam Kinzinger and Lynn Cheney for their work on the January 6th committee. I respect the level of thoroughness and accountability. But sadly, I think of the Republican Party. Many of them were leaders for civil rights and social justice. Many of them worked with Democrats to put Medicare in place. I mean, and many who were conservatives were truly intellectually small business conservatives and fiscal conservatives. The Republican Party today has been defined by Donald Trump's cult of personality. It's void of a philosophy. And I think that's very discouraging. So I would love to celebrate a good Republican idea. I haven't heard one in a long time.
That was Robert Zimmerman on the best Republican idea he's heard lately. Let's see now how John Kamen and Josh Lafazan answered that same question.
Creating the Environmental Protection Agency.
That was 1971, wasn't it?
So yes, there's been a gap, and can't wait to the next one.
You don't have to expand. That's fine. I'll totally accept that answer, and I thank you for the moment of levity there. Best Republican idea you've heard lately?
Best Republican I heard. It's from my brother Justin. It's from my brother Justin. There's a couple of parks that we want to expand. And this is why I love local government. And quite frankly, I'll miss local government, and I'll always want to have tentacles into local government because it's where things get done. We want to expand the types of sports that people can play because it's important, especially as we started during COVID, to allow seniors to continue to have an active lifestyle. So he was telling me all about pickleball and how important pickleball is, and how it's an alternative to tennis, and how we should use some money that we have to invest in our parks and upgrade our parks. Best Republican idea I heard lately.
That was Josh Lafazan on the best Republican idea he's heard lately. We'll finish off our answers now with Rima Rasool and Melanie DeRigo.
Ooh, what is the best Republican idea I've heard lately? I wish I could say something. Lately, the only things I've been hearing are just batshit. So I mean, I really can't. You know what I mean? I can't think of anything. I've literally what's been coming. This new stuff, the grooming, the CRT. They'll ban the books. I haven't heard any good ideas lately. I've heard nonsense and the don't say gay. It's blowing my mind that these things are happening in America.
That is sadly in 2022 an acceptable answer to that question. What is the best Republican idea that you've heard lately?
Best Republican idea that I have heard lately. Oof. Now you've stumped me, Andrew.
Being stumped is a perfectly acceptable answer.
I'm stumped. Yeah, I'm stumped.
Fair enough. That was Melanie DeRigo on the best Republican idea that she's heard lately. We're going to have 3 more questions to be asked and answered on this episode, including 2 of my favorites, favorite sports teams and favorite political movies or TV shows. And we'll get to those after this quick commercial break. You're listening to the 3 on NY3 podcast, focused exclusively on the race for Congress in New York's new and rapidly evolving 3rd District. I'm Andrew Whitman. We're continuing our review of the 3 on NY3 candidate questionnaire, and we're about to hit 2 of my favorite questions, the ones that had me smiling with anticipation before I asked a single query to a single candidate. That question was favorite sports teams. I was curious to learn more about the candidates and their passions, but I also wanted to put them on the spot. No candidate wants to offend or annoy any voters by saying they prefer another team to the one that the voter roots for. And if this was Seattle or Kansas City, it would be easy enough to do that. But this is New York, home to 2 of every kind of major league sports team and 3 hockey teams, which means candidates have some tough answers to give. One note, though, about the New York Islanders hockey team. The team's arena is on the district's border. It's based in Nassau County. They are the home team of New York's 3rd District, more so than any other team in any other sport. So if a candidate named the Islanders as a favorite, I pledged to ask them how much of an Islanders fan they were, and if they doubled down on the Islanders, so did I, asking them to name 2 current players just to show how much of a fan they really are. Think of this as an added cost if any candidate picked the lowest hanging fruit when answering this sports question. I'm not trying to be a gotcha guy, just looking for an accurate reading of the candidates and their potential answers. So here we go. Favorite sports teams, leading off Alessandra Biaggi and Robert Zimmerman.
The Yankees, and the Yankees.
Just the Yankees, no other teams.
I mean, I'm a baseball fan. I like tennis. I like, I'm not constantly watching sports on TV. I like to watch the Italians play soccer, or as they call it, football. But baseball is really my thing. I love baseball. I'm truly a baseball fan since I'm a little girl. And I am in a mixed household, which means that my dad is a Mets fan. So we've had some tumultuous times in the Biaggi household, but it's been fun. And I will just say that, I'm not a football fan, but I don't watch it on Sundays during the fall. But that lack of, having a favorite team in football is not the reason why I voted against the subsidies in the state to go to the Buffalo Bills station.
Sure,
and if anybody wants to make that conclusion, that's not what it is about.
And we'll just agree to disagree on the Yankees.
Fair enough.
What are your favorite sports teams?
My favorite sports team is the New York Mets. That is my, I'm a long-suffering Mets fan. I can't afford the therapy to figure it out, nor do I have the time to figure it out. It's just, it's one of my missions in life is to support the Mets.
We'll say a little prayer for Jacob deGrom's health. Any other teams you want to mention?
It's funny. When I was a kid, I was very young. I lived in Boston, Massachusetts, Newton Lower Falls, Massachusetts. And I became a devoted Boston Celtics fan. And then that love transitioned over to the Knicks, later the Nets. So I've always loved basketball and always loved tennis. And I must say, I got to give a shout out. I love my New York Islanders. Okay. That is, it's more of a religious fervor than a sports commitment.
You certainly seem to enjoy pain on the sports front.
Yeah, exactly.
How much of an Islanders fan are you? Because they're the low hanging fruit in this district. They're practically in the district if they're not actually in the district. So how much of an Islanders fan are you?
First of all, something, at the end of the day, I love the Islanders because it's a religious commitment to love the Islanders. You're a Long Islander. It's a personal commitment to support the Islanders. But I love the Islanders. I love the Mets. That's what I grew up with in so many ways.
Can you name any 2 current Islanders?
As a matter of fact, I can't.
Okay, fair enough.
But I go to the games.
Fair enough.
And I cheer them on. And that's, I'm going to get some flack for that. But I always felt an obligation to go to the Coliseum and now to go to Belmont. I just have a good time with my friends there.
Almost done, because we're definitely pushing it on time. Your favorite political movie or TV show, and why?
By the way, my favorite Islander of all time, Bobby Nystrom.
Okay.
He is, because I'll tell you why. When I was a kid and used to hang out and watch them play, he always would sign hockey pucks and show us some of his moves. He was just a great guy and a great Long Islander. So I have great memories of him.
That was Robert Zimmerman on his favorite sports teams. Next up, batting third on the question, Melanie Dorigo. She's followed by Rima Rasool.
The Yankees, the Giants, those are kind of my go. The Knicks, although, they've been the New York Liberty. I actually, fun fact for you. I was part of the Liberty Torch Patrol for 3 years. So I performed at Madison Square Garden during their games for 3 years when I was a lot younger.
You know what? That's the first shout out to the Liberty in asking this question. So very nicely done.
Thank you.
Name your favorite sports teams.
Ooh, okay, good one. Unfortunately, it's sad. The New York Knicks, the New York Mets. These are my teams that I grew up with. Not really big into football, so more baseball, basketball, and not really that much. I know this is Long Island. Everyone loves the Islanders. My brother is a huge, but I'm just not that into ice hockey. That
was Rima Rasool on her favorite sports team. Up next to bat us around, sports term, Josh Laffison, followed by John Kamen.
I mean, this is like commiserating here. Islanders, Mets, Jets, and Knicks. Although the Mets had an amazing win last night, at the top of the ninth with that rally.
I'm obliged to follow up because the Islanders are the low-hanging fruit in this district because they used to, they're either in the district or they're across the street from the district. So serious question, how much of an Islanders fan are you?
Let me tell you, I had corrective jaw surgery and I watched one of the games in the hospital bed. That's how serious, I had, still nauseous and still a little bit groggy from anesthesia, but I wasn't missing the playoff game last summer.
Can you name any two current Islanders?
I'm sorry. Come on. Yeah. We're going to go to a game too. You have Semyon Varlamov and you have Matt Martin and so many amazing Islanders.
That's enough. That's enough. Yeah. You have successfully qualified the answer. What are your favorite sports teams?
Jets, Mets, and Knicks.
Jets, Mets, and Knicks. Well,
and of course,
one out of three ain't bad.
Right, and of course, I'm an Islanders fan because I live in Long Island and we're all Islanders.
Okay, so you mentioned the Islanders, so I now have to ask a follow-up question, which is how much of an Islanders fan are you? How serious a fan are you?
I support that. My passion is, I'm a Jets fan. I got season tickets when I was younger. I go to a lot of games. Knicks and Mets. Islanders. Hockey isn't my primary sport. I watch. I support them. I love to see them win. Doesn't mean I don't go to a Ranger game time and again, if I could, or a Yankee game or a Giant game for that matter. But yeah, so I follow them to the extent I can, and I enjoy watching the Islanders.
Again, John Kamen there, wrapping up our tour of the candidates' favorite sports teams. Next up, the candidates' favorite political movie or TV show and why. This is another get-to-know-you kind of question and a way for us, the voters, to learn a little bit more about the person behind the candidate, if you will. As someone who loves political movies and TV shows, I was really looking forward to hearing the candidates' answers, and I was also eager to bring up my favorite answer to this question, some of which I did get in response to the answers to this particular question, but I'll get into my own favorites when we get to the next question, which was always designed as a follow-up. Anyhow, favorite political TV show or movie and why. We start with John Kamen and Rima Rasool.
I would say the movie Missiles of October, and it's an old movie, but I just took I was in a course recently where we discussed it and the decision-making process of groupthink and how they got to various decisions. And so to rewatch that movie from recently as opposed to the years, many years ago, it really was a wonderful, wonderful movie, and just the history of it, and the Khrushchev making, the Kennedy deciding to ignore Khrushchev's, the first radical, wild response, and it's like, let's pretend he never said the bad, and go right to the good, the more accommodating response. It was just brilliant, and so yeah, that was it. From TV shows, I watched like Fareed Zakaria maybe from a political news. I mean, he's a kind of, I like his approach to how he does things.
Your favorite political movie or TV show and why it resonates with you?
Okay, so my favorite political movie is Dave. Do you remember that movie Dave with what's that guy's name? The actor. He
I know
exactly
exactly.
like the president.
Kevin Kline, who's
such a great actor. he is like an identical of the president.
Yeah.
And like he comes in and he's just like a genuine good person. Like in real life, he's like a small business owner, and he like gets in and becomes the president and makes all these amazing changes. So, I mean, I like Dave.
He's an everyday person who found himself in that position and followed his heart.
And did a great job.
I'm not surprised that you've named that as an avatar. That was Rima Rasool discussing the movie Dave as her favorite political movie. Next up, Robert Zimmerman and Alessandra Biaggi.
The West Wing. The West Wing. I'll tell you why. It's not because it's about politics. It's because it's about patriotism. And it's about values and beliefs. And during the pandemic, I started watching, because I was home like all the rest of us, started watching them on reruns. And it holds up so well. That and the Golden Girls. Those are my two.
Is there any character on the West Wing that is you or that you aspire to be?
Good question. Maybe Rob Lowe. I get confused for him often, in case you're wondering. People mistake me for him all the time. But I sort of like his idealism and navigating through the pragmatism.
The Sam Seaborn approach. Your favorite political movie or TV show, and why it has resonated with you?
My favorite, well, it's not considered a political show, I guess, but I love Billions a lot. The reason it's resonated with me is because here's a fun fact that probably most nobody knows. I worked in a hedge fund after law school for a little while, and the juxtaposition of private entities and industries and government officials, and especially in New York and New York City, the tension between these two worlds is so it's so well done in the show, and it's so realistic from what I've experienced. And so I think there's really no greater U.S. Attorney's Office in the country. I'm sorry, every other U.S. Attorney's Office, if you're listening, then the Southern District of New York is like the premier, U.S. Attorney's Office. And to have that be represented in Billions is really neat. And to watch how, the hedge funds are trying to get around some of the rules and laws, even though hedge funds are a creation of a loophole actually in the law, which is a random thing that almost nobody knows either. Anyway, the point is, I love the show. I think it's really hip and really cool. I think it represents New York politics in a really awesome way. And it's super cutthroat and aggressive. And that is awesome. So I enjoy it.
That was Alessandra Biaggi on Billions there, a politics of business show, if you will, as her answer to favorite political movie or TV show. Here now to close out the question, Josh Laffison and Melanie Dorigo.
West Wing, I've watched it 3 times, and why? Because Aaron Sorkin's optimism matches mine.
That is the correct answer. What's your favorite political movie or TV show, and why?
Ooh, favorite political movie or TV show? I mean, well, recently I was very impressed with Don't Look Up, so I hope that you will see that. I watch a lot of news shows, I don't know that I have necessarily a favorite these days, but I would say, current events, let's go with Don't Look Up.
I just got around to watching the Jon Stewart, Steve Carell political movie. So and it had such an impact on me that I've forgotten the name of it.
The one, is that the one where Steve Carell goes to that small town?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah, it made its points, but a little on the nose for my liking. But
well, Don't Look Up is very difficult to watch. It's not going to be enjoyable, but and it is, if you thought that movie was on the nose, this one will punch you in the nose.
would not be the first time that's happened. That was Melanie Dorigo on her favorite political movie or TV show. If you've ever watched me on RNN or Fios One, or if you're watching on YouTube and currently reading my shirt, you probably know that my answer to that question would be The West Wing. The show always focused on the honorable pursuit of politics and public service, traits we could really use more of in our politics today. The West Wing also served as a springboard into the final question that we're going to review on this episode of 3 on NY3. On the 3 on NY3 Twitter feed, you'll find a clip from Season 1, Episode 19 of The West Wing, an episode titled Let Bartlett Be Bartlett, featuring Martin Sheen as the show's president, Jed Bartlett. In the scene, the president is itching to speak his mind on a number of subjects, but he fears about his possible re-election and that speaking out might hurt him if he runs for re-election. So He worries about that until he overcomes those worries in the clip we've posted to Twitter. In it, he says that speaking out is, quote, more important than re-election. And something being more important than re-election is something we never hear from candidates or elected officials. What's more important than your own electoral success? What's more important than election or re-election? It is not an easy question to answer, which is exactly why I asked it. Here are the answers now from Melanie DeRigo and Robert Zimmerman.
I will tell you, I have not watched The West Wing, which I know that's another fun fact. But
I'm not prepared to hold that against you at this point. That's fine. We all come to The West Wing in our own time.
I will share a little personal story. When I decided to run in 2019, we had a family conversation. My family and I are very, very tight, very close. We do a lot of activities, a lot of political activities together. And my husband has been unbelievably supportive of me and my run and been very encouraging. And I sat him down and I said, look, you have to be prepared that if I run and I win, I might only serve for 2 years. And he looked at me and he said, why would you only serve for 2 years? And I said to him, because when I win, I am going to work as hard as I can every single day to pass the agenda that I'm running on, because that's what running for office is about. It's not about the political trades, the political deals, the diciness, the this, the that, it's not even about the re-election. Now, of course, the agenda that I'm fighting for, if done well, should earn me re-election, but I will sleep very, very well at night, knowing that I've represented this district the way a representative should represent a district. I will sleep great for the rest of my life knowing that. But so I hope that answers your question there. To me, it's not about a re-election. It's about passing the policies that we know people really need, because frankly, the policies I'm running on are life and death for a lot of people.
What's more important than re-election for you?
I've known a lot of people who served in Congress over a lot of years. And many of them who've served for decades, nobody remembers. Some who've served for 2 or 3 terms are part of history. I think of Al Lowenstein, who led the Dump Johnson movement, Bella Abzug, Shirley Chisholm. I think of many of those folks who made history by what they did in the office, not how long they served in the office. So I guess in response to your question, and I think it's an important question to bring up. Serving in Congress is not defined to me by how long I'm there. It's what I do when I'm there. And that's how I define public service.
That was Robert Zimmerman answering what's more important than re-election to him. Let's hear now the answers of Josh Lafazin and John Kamen. What's more important than re-election to you?
What's more important than re-election to me is doing the right thing and saying what I believe in my heart, even when it may be unpopular. I talk about government needing term limits because government was never meant to be a lifetime employment opportunity. And so if I speak my mind on an issue, and if I do the right thing because I believe in my heart I'm serving my constituents and I lose an election, then I will sleep fine at night. But I'd rather lose an election than lose my integrity.
I think that the great challenge when you're an official, especially an elected official, is again that balance between doing what you believe and trying to also represent. And it should be a constant struggle, and it's easy when they align. It's when they don't that becomes a challenge. And so where do we draw the line when we're going to take that position that is just untenable and there's no surviving it? And I suppose it's we have those lines in the sand in terms of one's own dignity and honor, and I believe I'm a person of honor and substance. And so if there was a position that I simply could not fathom supporting, I would be okay with not winning. That when I was a town supervisor and I was the chief executive of this town, employees would come to me and say, they got another job and they'd be upset and they're leaving. And I would say, we're all leaving. We're all leaving at some point. You just happen to take a new job. You're leaving now. I might leave at the end of the next election. I might leave in a few years. I might, so it's not about being here. It's about what we do when we are here. and let's make the best of it and try to do good and be a professional, and there's a lot of different ways to talk about that. But I think that's where I would fall on that, and I think many others would as well. But it's how do I maintain my own sense of honor on an issue that just I can't transcend, and I can think of some, but I wouldn't want to just guess at some of those issues. It'd be very deep-seated and personal.
Finally, here's Alessandra Biaggi and Rima Rasool on what's more important than re-election to them.
Having and holding on to the values of what make me me. And that's no matter what, right? So I am somebody who stands for criminal justice reform and for making sure that people's lives are not harmed because of a mistake that has been made. And also I'm somebody who cares about victims' rights. I don't find those two things to be in conflict with one another. And I fight for both of them because as a survivor of sexual abuse, I care a lot about survivors' rights and for rape survivors' rights and things in that category. I am going to take the stands that I take, even if it means that I stand alone, because that is how I was raised. And I know that that might sound so antithetical to what it means to be in politics, but I will just say that I have served for 4 years now, and I know that there are a lot of people who voted away, who truly wish that they could have voted another way. And the reason that they didn't vote the other way is because they felt like their political loyalties were to a party or to an interest or to whatever it was, as opposed to the people that they represent. And I think that that is something that is very rare in politics. And the way that we can make sure that that happens more and more, to make sure it's not rare, but that more people actually care about doing the right thing, is by electing people from the grassroots or ground up. Because the way I was elected in 2018 has allowed me to have a freedom in Albany and in the Senate that I would not trade for anything. It's an independence that is invaluable to me. And yet I'm still able to be part of this Democratic conference. I'm proud to be, but I'm very outspoken against the things that I think are harmful. And nobody would, I think, disagree. It definitely has given me a reputation sometimes of being quote unquote difficult, but I think that's a sexist trope that I really don't pay much attention to. So I am very proud of what we've been able to do here. And I really actually feel grateful for all that we've accomplished. And again, I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to make a difference. And I really hope that people can see that and understand that. And even if they can't, that's okay. Actually, I thought just the question you had earlier, like what's one thing that the voting against or voting for or whatever it might be. When I first got into office, one of the ways in which I was like, oh yeah, this makes a lot of sense, we should keep it this way, which was like the way in which our offices are given money and funding. So like if you're in the majority, you get more money than if you're in the minority, you get less money for staff in an office. And at first I was like, that's great, let's go. And then as time has gone on, I'm like, this is awful. Actually, like, I don't think that this is a good idea at all. Why? Because Republicans represent everybody. I'm a Democrat, I represent Republicans, independents, Democrats. We all need the same amount of funds to represent the communities we represent. I think it's ridiculous that we allow for a state budget to give the majority more money than the minority. I know a lot of people think that's really crazy of me to say, but I actually think that if we want to stop the cycle of political retribution, you start to make things fair and you cut out that vitriol and eventually it goes away.
What's more important for you than re-election?
For staying true to myself, the same exact thing.
Such as?
Staying true to myself, with how I feel. Like, for example, right now it's bail reform is a huge topic. And I get asked about it, I think, every day. And unfortunately, again, with the messaging, I think that, a lot of people don't understand like that, why we needed the bail reform that we people fought for. These are things that activists fought for that we finally put into place. Cash bail, and a lot of these things affect minority communities and poor people more than the wealthy, who has thousands of dollars sitting around at home to kind of. And I think a lot, to be safe, I could sit here and be like, oh yeah, blah blah, like it's bail reform is bad, but I don't think it is. You know what I mean? People don't want to hear it, but that's okay with me. I think at the end of the day, I don't want to be a sellout. I'm not going to sit here and go around and tell people what they want to hear. I feel like we already have other candidates doing that.
And that will just about bring us to the close of this episode of 3 on NY3. I'm Andrew Whitman. You can follow the show on Twitter. The show's handle is @3onNY3. Mine is @WhitmanAndrew. Video versions of the podcast available on YouTube. Audio streams can be found on all major podcast hosting apps. Just search for 3 on NY3. Please like or subscribe to the podcast wherever and however you are consuming it. Give us a nice rating if you would. Tell a friend, yada, yada, yada. To contact the show with questions, complaints, predictions for this year's Tony Awards, whatever, you can email the show at 3onny3@gmail.com. Primary day has moved. It is now August 23rd, and we hope finally that is its final date, August 23rd. Election day is November 8th. This has been 3 on NY3 with Andrew Whitman. Bye-bye for now.